The day I moved into my quiet suburban neighborhood, I thought it would be the perfect place for peace and calm. I had worked hard to buy my own home and escape the noise of the city, so this street with manicured lawns and orderly homes felt like a dream come true. But I had not yet met Karen, and Karen was the kind of neighbor who could turn even paradise into a headache. Karen was the self-proclaimed queen of our HOA. She walked around with a clipboard in her hand, like it was a crown. She waved at people with a fake smile, but everyone knew she was more interested in spying on them than being friendly. She made rules about the color of our doors, the type of grass we planted, and even how long we could leave our garbage cans outside. She was unbearable to most people, but when she bought her shiny brand new Tesla, things got worse. It started small. One morning, I noticed an extension cord running across my lawn. It led from the side of my house to Karen's driveway where her Tesla was parked. I was confused at first. Maybe she was just borrowing it quickly. But when I walked outside and asked her what she was doing, she smiled like nothing was wrong and said, "Oh, my car died last night, so I just needed a little charge. I'll unplug it in a bit." I didn't want to start a fight on my first month living there, so I let it slide. Big mistake the next morning. The cord was there again, and the day after that too, Karen had decided that my power outlet was her free charging station. I tried to talk to her politely. I said, "Karen, I pay for that electricity, and it is not okay for you to plug in your car without asking." She rolled her eyes and told me, "Well, as part of the HOA, we all share resources, and besides, you make plenty of money, so it is not a big deal." I was stunned. Who even thinks like that? But she clearly had no shame, so I unplugged her car and locked the outlet cover. But 2 days later, I noticed the lock had been broken and the cord was back in place. My jaw dropped. She had actually destroyed my lock to steal more power. I reported her to the HOA thinking maybe they would handle it. But of course, since Karen practically controlled the board, they sided with her. They sent me a letter accusing me of being unneighborly and reminded me of my obligation to promote harmony in the community. It was laughable. I was the victim, yet somehow I was the bad guy. It was then I realized I had to take matters into my own hands. I started keeping track of how much power she was using. I checked my electric bills, and they had spiked hundreds of dollars more than usual. It was obvious her nightly charging sessions were draining me dry. I confronted her again, and this time she smirked and said, "If you cannot afford to live here, maybe you should move somewhere cheaper." That was the final straw. Karen had turned her Tesla into a weapon against me, and I was not going to let her win. I spent the next few weeks planning a solution. I talked to a friend who was an electrician and asked about ways to protect my outlets. He explained different surge protectors and breakers. Then he joked, "Well, if she keeps stealing your power, you could always rig a surge trap to fry her battery." It was a joke, but it gave me an idea. I researched it carefully. I did not want to hurt anyone or break the law, but I figured if I installed a surge device that overloaded only when someone bypassed my lock, it would be her own fault and her own risk. One Friday night, I set it up. I installed a specialized surge protector inside the outlet box and connected it to a trigger. If the outlet was tampered with, the surge would fire a massive jolt, not enough to burn my house down, but enough to fry any car battery plugged into it. Then I waited. I even put up a camera to record the whole thing because I knew Karen could never admit her guilt without proof. Sure enough, by Saturday morning, the cord was back on my lawn and her Tesla was humming quietly while it charged. I smiled to myself because I knew what was coming around. Noon, I heard shouting from across the street. I walked outside and saw Karen pacing around her driveway, her hands on her head and her Tesla dead as a brick. The screen inside was black, and no matter how many times she pressed the buttons, nothing worked. She screamed at her husband. She screamed at the sky, and finally she screamed at me. "You broke my car," she yelled, pointing across the street. I calmly pulled out my phone and showed her the footage of her cutting my lock again and plugging into my power without permission. I told her, "Karen, you destroyed my property. You stole my electricity, and now you are facing the consequences." She stuttered and threatened to call the police, so I encouraged her to go ahead. When the cops showed up, I handed them the footage. I explained everything from the stolen power to the broken locks to the surge protector. They looked at Karen with tired eyes, clearly used to dealing with her kind, and one officer said, "Ma, you were trespassing and vandalizing his property. You are lucky he is not pressing charges." Her jaw dropped. She tried to argue, but the officers told her flat out that she had no case. In fact, they warned her that if she continued to harass me, she could be fined or even arrested. Karen stomped back to her house, humiliated, and her Tesla sat useless in the driveway for weeks. She eventually had to tow it to the dealership, where she learned the battery replacement would cost more than $20,000. I almost felt bad, but then I remembered how much she had stolen from me and how smug she had been about it. She tried to rally the HOA against me, but this time she failed because I shared the video with the other neighbors, and they were shocked. They finally saw her for who she really was, and for once the HOA had no choice but to shut her down. From that day forward, Karen stopped messing with me. She avoided eye contact whenever she walked past my yard, and her clipboard was nowhere to be seen. It felt like peace had finally returned to the neighborhood. I had beaten Karen at her own game. Not with shouting, not with drama, but with planning, patience, and a little creative payback. The funny thing is, after all that, I started getting along better with the other neighbors. They admitted they had all been scared of Karen and her power trips, but once they saw her taken down a notch, they felt free to speak up too soon enough. She was no longer running the HOA, and a new group took over, people who actually cared about fairness and respect. It was almost like my battle with her had freed the whole community. Looking back, I realize I learned a few important lessons. First, never let a bully take advantage of you, because the more you tolerate, the more they will push. Second, sometimes you cannot rely on systems like an HOA because corruption and favoritism will always exist. And third, with enough patience and clever thinking, you can turn any problem into a solution. Karen thought she could steal from me forever, but instead, she ended up paying the ultimate price. Not just with money, but with her reputation. Now every time I see her Tesla parked on her driveway, I cannot help but grin, because I know it is running on a brand new battery that she had to pay for herself, and she will think twice before ever touching my outlets again.